When automotive YouTuber Mat Armstrong revealed that he had purchased a severely damaged Bugatti for restoration, most viewers assumed they were simply watching another ambitious rebuild project. Armstrong had already become known online for repairing wrecked luxury vehicles that many considered impossible to save. But this time, the reaction from Bugatti itself shifted the story into something far larger than entertainment. As the rebuild progressed publicly on YouTube, discussions surrounding repair access, manufacturer control, software restrictions, and ownership rights began attracting global attention. Critics questioned whether companies should maintain extensive authority over products after they are sold. Supporters of manufacturers argued that advanced vehicles require strict oversight to protect safety, engineering integrity, and liability standards. At the same time, lawmakers across Europe were already debating stronger right-to-repair legislation aimed at increasing consumer repair access and reducing dependence on manufacturer-controlled systems. Armstrong's Bugatti rebuild unexpectedly became a visible example of the exact tensions regulators were trying to address. What started as a damaged hypercar restoration slowly evolved into a public debate about technology, ownership, and corporate power in the modern era. But how did one YouTube project become connected to European policy discussions? And why did the controversy surrounding a single Bugatti resonate with millions of people who had never even seen a hypercar in person? The answers begin with the rise of a creator who built his reputation by doing what many manufacturers would rather consumers never attempt themselves. Before the Bugatti controversy ever began, Mat Armstrong had already established himself as one of the fastest-growing automotive creators on YouTube. Unlike traditional car reviewers who focused on performance tests or luxury experiences, Armstrong specialized in rebuilding severely damaged vehicles that insurance companies often considered beyond repair. His projects usually involved high-end performance cars including Lamborghinis, McLarens, Ferraris, and Porsches. What attracted viewers was not only the value of the vehicles, but the transparency of the process itself. Armstrong openly documented mechanical failures, sourcing problems, budget pressures, and mistakes along the way. Audiences were not watching polished marketing content. They were watching real engineering problems unfold in real time. That honesty created trust. Millions of viewers became invested in the rebuild process because the channel combined technical detail with emotional stakes. Every successful repair felt earned rather than manufactured. But Bugatti represented an entirely different category of vehicle. The French hypercar manufacturer is known for producing some of the world's rarest and most technologically advanced cars. Repairs are typically performed only through authorized service networks with highly controlled procedures and manufacturer oversight. When Armstrong announced he had purchased a heavily crashed Bugatti, online reactions were immediate. Some viewers called it impossible. Others questioned whether Bugatti would even allow the project to continue publicly. Hypercars are not ordinary vehicles. They operate with complex software systems, specialized engineering, and strict certification requirements. At first, the rebuild looked like another risky YouTube challenge. But as Armstrong moved deeper into the process, it became clear this project would test more than engineering skill alone. The biggest obstacle was not necessarily the damage itself. It was the growing tension between independent repair culture and one of the world's most protective automotive brands. The Bugatti Armstrong purchased had suffered severe crash damage, making the restoration extraordinarily difficult from the beginning. Publicly available footage from the rebuild showed extensive structural issues, damaged electronics, and missing components that would challenge even professional repair facilities. For most owners, a repair of this scale would normally require factory-approved technicians and direct manufacturer involvement. But Armstrong chose to rebuild the car independently while documenting every stage for millions of online viewers. That public visibility changed everything. As the rebuild gained attention, discussions reportedly emerged surrounding manufacturer approval, safety concerns, and access to official systems. Armstrong spoke openly in videos about the difficulties involved in sourcing parts and navigating restrictions connected to diagnostics and technical information. According to public discussions surrounding the project, Bugatti expressed concerns about unauthorized repairs and the risks associated with rebuilding such an advanced vehicle outside official channels. From Bugatti's perspective, those concerns were not entirely unusual. Modern hypercars involve highly specialized engineering where improper repairs could potentially affect safety, performance, and liability. Companies at this level carefully protect their reputation because even a single catastrophic failure can damage consumer trust worldwide. But online audiences interpreted the situation very differently. For many viewers, the controversy reflected a broader issue already affecting countless industries. Consumers increasingly own products physically, while manufacturers continue controlling them digitally. The Bugatti rebuild suddenly became symbolic of a larger struggle between independent ownership rights and corporate authority. The more obstacles Armstrong encountered publicly, the more the audience grew emotionally invested in the outcome. The rebuild was no longer just entertainment. It was beginning to look like a test case for modern ownership itself. And as the public debate intensified online, lawmakers across Europe were already considering legislation that could directly affect situations exactly like this one. While Armstrong's rebuild captured attention online, Europe was already moving through an important political conversation surrounding consumer repair rights. The European Union had been expanding discussions around right to repair legislation aimed at giving consumers greater ability to repair products independently rather than relying entirely on manufacturers. Initially, much of the debate focused on electronics and household appliances. Regulators argued that extending product lifespans could reduce electronic waste, lower consumer costs, and improve sustainability goals across Europe. But over time, vehicles became part of the wider conversation because modern automobiles increasingly rely on software-controlled systems. The Bugatti rebuild unexpectedly illustrated many of those concerns in real time. Millions watched Armstrong struggle with restricted access to parts, software systems, and manufacturer-controlled processes. Supporters of repair rights policies argued that legal owners should have the freedom to repair products they purchased, especially when independent specialists possess the necessary technical expertise. At the same time, manufacturers defended restrictions by pointing to safety, cybersecurity, and liability concerns. Hypercars like Bugatti models are engineered to operate under extreme conditions. Improper calibration, structural repair errors, or unauthorized software modifications could potentially create serious dangers. This created a complicated balancing act for European policymakers. Regulators needed to support consumer rights without undermining legitimate safety standards or intellectual property protections. What made the Armstrong case unique was its visibility. Most regulatory debates remain abstract and difficult for the public to follow. But this story simplified the issue into something people immediately understood. A car owner trying to repair his own vehicle while facing increasing manufacturer resistance. Suddenly, a YouTube rebuild had become connected to one of the biggest ownership debates in modern technology. But despite growing public support, Armstrong still faced the hardest challenge of all, actually finishing the rebuild without full factory cooperation. As Armstrong continued rebuilding the Bugatti, the technical challenges became increasingly visible. Unlike ordinary vehicles, modern hypercars rely on interconnected software systems, advanced sensors, and manufacturer-specific calibration procedures that often require official tools and approvals. Viewers watched the project evolve from physical repair work into a battle against digital restrictions and technical barriers. Certain components reportedly proved extremely difficult to source. Other systems required specialized integration procedures that independent mechanics rarely gain access to. This exposed a major shift within the automotive industry itself. In previous decades, highly skilled mechanics could often repair vehicles using mechanical knowledge and physical tools alone. But modern vehicles increasingly depend on software ecosystems controlled directly by manufacturers. Armstrong's rebuild highlighted how difficult independent repairs can become when access to information, diagnostics, and proprietary systems remains tightly restricted. Yet the project also demonstrated something else. Independent expertise still matters. Through engineering creativity, fabrication, research, and persistence, Armstrong continued finding solutions that many viewers initially believed impossible. Psychologically, this became part of the emotional appeal of the series. Audiences were not only watching a car rebuild, they were watching an individual confront a system designed around centralized manufacturer control. Every successful repair felt symbolic of something larger. At the same time, critics continued raising legitimate concerns. If a rebuilt hypercar later suffered a failure, questions surrounding responsibility and safety could become extremely serious. This kept the public debate divided between those prioritizing ownership freedom and those prioritizing strict engineering oversight. By this stage, the rebuild had evolved into far more than content creation. It had become a visible collision between old mechanical culture and a rapidly changing technological future. And as the Bugatti moved closer to running again, the public reaction surrounding the project began spreading far beyond automotive communities. One reason the controversy surrounding Armstrong's Bugatti rebuild became so influential was because audiences recognized similar patterns in their own lives. Even people with no interest in hypercars understood the deeper issue being discussed. Modern consumers increasingly face products that are difficult, or sometimes impossible, to repair independently. Smartphones require proprietary tools. Farm equipment often depends on locked software systems. Electronics manufacturers restrict replacement components. Vehicles now contain digital systems that can only be accessed through authorized networks. The Bugatti rebuild became relatable because it reflected frustrations many people already felt toward modern technology. Online discussions expanded rapidly across forums, social media platforms, and automotive communities. Some viewers argued that manufacturers were slowly redefining ownership itself by limiting what consumers could legally or practically do with purchased products. Others defended companies by emphasizing safety standards and the complexity of modern engineering. Environmental concerns also entered the discussion. Repair advocates argued that restricting independent repair contributes to unnecessary waste because products are discarded rather than restored. European policymakers had already linked repair rights initiatives to sustainability goals designed to reduce long-term environmental impact. The emotional power of Armstrong's story came from its simplicity. One person was publicly attempting to overcome barriers that millions of consumers quietly encounter in smaller ways every day. For supporters, each repair milestone represented persistence against corporate control. For critics, the rebuild represented the risks of bypassing specialized safety systems. Either way, the project had clearly evolved beyond entertainment. It had become part of a global cultural conversation about technology, power, and consumer freedom. But beneath all the public arguments remained one deeper unresolved question. What does ownership actually mean in a world controlled by software? At the center of the Bugatti controversy was a deeper psychological transformation happening across modern society. For generations, ownership traditionally implied control. If someone purchased a car, appliance, or machine, they were generally free to repair, modify, or maintain it however they chose. But digital technology has changed that relationship dramatically. Today, many products operate less like permanently owned possessions and more like systems partially controlled by manufacturers through software, licensing agreements, diagnostics, and remote authorization. Consumers may physically possess a product while still lacking full access to its functionality. Armstrong's Bugatti rebuild made this shift visible in a highly public way. Psychologically, this creates frustration because ownership expectations remain rooted in older ideas of independence and control. Consumers often assume purchasing an expensive product grants complete authority over it. But increasingly, that authority can be limited by software restrictions, service requirements, or manufacturer ecosystems. This tension explains why the rebuild resonated emotionally with so many viewers. The Bugatti itself represented extreme luxury, but the underlying issue felt universal. At the same time, manufacturers faced legitimate fears about liability, cybersecurity, intellectual property theft, and public safety. Modern vehicles are vastly more complex than older mechanical systems, especially at the hypercar level where performance tolerances are extremely precise. European lawmakers attempting to expand repair rights legislation therefore faced a difficult challenge. They were not simply debating repairs. They were redefining the future relationship between corporations and consumers in the digital era. The Armstrong project unintentionally became one of the clearest public examples of that conflict playing out in real time. And by the time the rebuild approached completion, the story had already changed the public conversation surrounding repair rights far more than anyone initially expected. By the end of Armstrong's Bugatti rebuild, the project had already achieved something larger than automotive entertainment. It became part of a wider international conversation about consumer rights, corporate control, and the future of ownership in technology-driven industries. Although the controversy centered around a rare hypercar, the issues involved affected ordinary consumers everywhere. Cars, smartphones, electronics, tractors, and appliances increasingly depend on proprietary software systems that manufacturers continue controlling after sale. The Bugatti rebuild simply made those concerns impossible to ignore because millions watched the struggle unfold publicly. For repair rights advocates, the project demonstrated how difficult independent restoration can become in a world dominated by manufacturer-controlled ecosystems. For manufacturers, the situation reinforced legitimate concerns about safety, liability, and protecting highly advanced technology from misuse. Importantly, the controversy did not create a simple hero and villain narrative. The debate remained complicated because both sides raised concerns grounded in reality. Independent repair access can support consumer freedom, competition, and sustainability. But unrestricted access to advanced systems can also create risks involving safety and security. What made the Armstrong rebuild culturally significant was its ability to humanize a complex policy issue. European repair rights discussions suddenly felt understandable because viewers could see the consequences play out through one real-world story. In many ways, the Bugatti project reflected a larger turning point already happening across society. As products become more digital, connected, and software-dependent, the definition of ownership itself continues changing. And perhaps that is the real reason this story resonated so deeply. It forced people to ask whether future consumers will truly own the products they buy, or simply receive limited permission to use them under corporate control. Now that repair rights debates continue expanding across Europe and beyond, how should governments balance consumer freedom, environmental sustainability, and manufacturer responsibility in the future?